can't fade that either. Once again, the genius functionality of our.
We thought we were so smart with this one, and that did not work out at all. But welcome, everybody. It's time for debate night here, joined by Dave, but I'm going to change his name to his real name, Matt Leck.
It's a new thing I'm trying out.
My new thing is I'm just call myself by my friend's name when we go out. It really, it keeps the ladies on their toes. No, we're really stoked for this. We're going to be watching Colin, Allred, and Ted Cruz. I think we should be all set up. I think they're going to be starting any second now.
Morning news. Polls show the race for U.S. Senate in Texas here is a
There we are. And
both
let us know on the audio levels, folks, because we don't have as much of say over it as we'd like, but we'll monitor that. Maybe a little more now.
First, the rules for this debate. Both candidates agreed to the following.
I'll tell you, I think it's bad for America that they've done the no audience for all of these.
And we will go back
I agree with you. I mean,
rebuttal. An additional follow-up of 60
yeah,
seconds will be at the discretion.
It's tough because
of
they were just stacking the
countdown
audience with
clocks in the
donors
studio here with
beforehand.
us that the candidates can see tonight to help keep them on track time-wise. Finally, both candidates will get 1 minute each
it's
to introduce
dystopian.
themselves here in just a moment. At the end of the debate, they will
Yeah, it
get
feels
another
very
60
creepy.
seconds
A
for a
written
closing
debate
Now
where
let's
like
welcome
goes
the
into the
candidates
Library
for
of
US
Congress
Senate
or something.
Texas
Probably
tonight.
is like what we
Democrat
should have.
Colin Allred and Republican Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, I didn't realize before reading the piece, was it from Texas Monthly,
Gentlemen,
that
thank you
he's
each for
been
being
doing
here
a
tonight.
centrist
Mr.
rebranding.
Allred, you won the coin toss.
Yeah, no, he
for the
has been. He
opening
has
introduction to go
Democrats for
first.
Cruz.
You chose to go first. You have 60 seconds, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you all for moderating, and Senator Cruz, thank you for joining. I'm Colin Allred. I'm a fourth-generation Texan. I'm a husband and a
This
father.
is a stump speech.
I was raised here
Like,
in Dallas by
this is a
single
commercial.
mom
I'm not even
who's a public
kidding.
school teacher, and I've been shaped by every part of this state. My grandfather was a customs officer in Brownsville. That's where my mom and Nat were born and raised, where I spent a lot of my childhood. I was captain of the Baylor football team in Waco, trained for the NFL draft.
God, he makes
in
it sound
Houston.
so
And I've
boring.
served my hometown in Dallas
Oh, man.
Congress for the last 6 years. In that time, I've been the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I'm the exact
love that.
opposite of
Oh,
Senator
great.
Cruz.
Well,
who's
what's the most
extreme
bipartisan
Senate in the United
Texan in
States
Congress,
Senate.
by the
Maybe
way?
the
It
most
sounds
extreme
like
in the last 30 years.
Yeah, is that some
That's
Texans
not
want?
enough. He's also only
Does any
focused on
Texan want
himself.
that?
That's how you can go to Cancun when millions of Texans need you and hundreds are dying.
Come on, dude, you got to punch him a little harder with that.
We can get a new one. That's what this election is all about. That's what I'm asking Texans to give me a chance to do.
Senator, you have 60 seconds for your opening statement.
Thank you, Gromer. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to everyone at home listening. You know, Texas is an incredible place.
That's true.
I'm the son of an immigrant who came from Cuba with nothing, penniless, washed dishes making 50 cents an hour, but came to Texas to seek out the American dream.
Spent some time
I'm
with the
Colin
CIA.
He's the son of
Well,
someone
it was
in
dad.
football circles.
What were you doing in New
Went on to the
Orleans?
NFL. Now he's the United States Congress.
Matt, the volume for the
It is
debate apparently is a
incredible
little low for people.
That both
Little low,
Congressman
okay.
Allred and I have the great privilege of representing the people of Texas in the United States Congress. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to listen very carefully to the difference between words and actions. Colin Allred is going to try to say an awful lot of words that sound reasonable. But what he's not going to talk about is his own record or my record. And I'm over and over again going to
Going
take
to
us back
Cancun.
to actual records, his record and my record. We're doing an awful lot right in the state of Texas. Colin Allred wants to change that. I want to keep Texas, Texas.
Senator, that is your time. We do want to begin the debate tonight with two big issues that are personal to Texans. Senator, the first question is for you. Texas has one of the strictest abortion bans in the United States. There's no exception for rape or for incest, as you know. In 2021, you co-sponsored a bill in Congress that included those exceptions. But a year later, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, you said that you agree with the Texas law that has 0 exceptions. So tonight, the question is, where do you stand on this? And we're asking for your personal opinion as a Texan and as a father.
Ooh.
Well, listen, abortion is an issue that many Texans, many Americans care deeply about. And it's an issue that people of good faith can disagree. People are genuinely and deeply pro-life. People are genuinely and deeply pro-choice.
You know, you really
and there are all
can't do
sorts
this.
of positions in between.
Yeah, and if
I
there's a
agree
fight
with
in
the
our
United
courts
States
that we
Supreme
pack
Court that
aside.
under our Constitution, the way we resolve questions like that, questions on which we have real and genuine disagreements, is at the ballot box, is voting. And that's why the state of the law now is that the legislature in Austin sets the laws in Texas. You wouldn't expect Texas's laws to be the same as
Yeah, but you
California.
live
You wouldn't
here
expect
at
Alabama to be
Cruz,
the
and
same
this
as
is why
New
you
York.
can't take this
I will say,
non-position
though,
that
in Texas,
Republicans
on
are
the
doing
question of
everywhere.
abortion, there are a lot of areas we disagree, but there's also a lot of consensus.
No.
In Texas, we overwhelmingly support that parents should be notified and have to consent before their child gets an abortion. In Texas, we overwhelmingly agree that late-term abortions in the 8th and 9th months, that's too extreme. And I'll tell you, in Texas, we overwhelmingly agree that taxpayer money shouldn't pay for abortions. Unfortunately, Congressman Allred's voting record rejects that Texas consensus. He has voted in favor of striking down Texas's law that gives parents the right to be notified and consent. He's voted in favor of striking down Texas's law and legalizing abortion up to and including the 8th and 9th
polling
month
in
of
Texas
pregnancy.
on the abortion
That's
ban
extreme, and it's not where the people of
that
Texas
people
are.
do not
Senator,
like
that's
it.
your time. Congressman, 90 seconds.
So the big
for
one
response.
here.
It's time to finally tell the truth here. Senator Cruz just looked into a camera and lied to Texans about my position. Let's be very clear. You should look into the camera and speak to Kate Cox, who's watching right now, and explain to her why you said that this law that you said is perfectly reasonable, why she was forced to leave her 2 children behind and flee our state to get the care that she needed. Or look into the camera and talk to Amanda Zarowski, who's watching right now, and explain to her why it's perfectly reasonable that because she had a complication in her pregnancy and was denied care so long that she may never be able to have children of her own. Or to the 26,000 Texas women who've been forced to give birth to their rapist child under this law that you called perfectly reasonable. It's not. This is not freedom. I trust Texas women to make their own healthcare decisions. You know, Allie and I have had 2 baby boys here in Dallas in the last 5 years. You're scared the entire time. You don't know what they're going to say. But I can't imagine if the doctor would come in, said there's a problem with the baby or a problem with Allie, but there's nothing I can do because Ted Cruz thinks he knows better. That's not who we are as Texans. When I'm in the United States Senate, we'll restore a woman's right to choose. We'll make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. And we'll make these stories of seeing these horrific experiences going on all over our state something of the past. That's my commitment to Texans.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, you did not directly
Better than
answer
Biden,
the question.
certainly
I wanna ask
better
it to you
than
again.
Walz, I would
Do you
say,
support
on
or
that
oppose
issue.
exceptions for rape?
I mean,
or
he's
for
ready
incest?
for it.
Again, asking as a Texan and as a father.
Because this is such a
So I
winner
want
and
to be
such a
very clear.
loser
If
for
you
the
listen to
Republicans.
Congressman Allred's answer, at no point did he make any reference to his own record. He desperately wants to hide from the fact
Yeah, who cares
that as
about
a
that exception
congressman,
bullshit,
he
Ted? We
voted
don't
to strike
do
down Texas's
between
parental
women
notification
and
law.
doctors.
He voted to strike down Texas's parental consent law. He voted to
'cause that's just
legalize
extra shit in the way
late-term
of
abortions, including
people
the
needing
8th and
care.
9th months. He says he wants to codify Roe versus Wade, but that's not what he voted for. And I'll tell you what, tonight I suspect he's going to run away from his record on a whole lot of issues. We have a website. It's called allredfacts.com. Allredfacts.com.
You're using
this
Every time he gives an answer,
too
just
early,
click on
Ted. You got to save
allredfacts.com,
this for another
and we'll
issue.
show you the exact
Nikki Haley had
vote
DeSantis.
he
Leave this
cast.
for the border
Now,
where
as for
Allred is
what the
going to
law
try to
should be
mirror
in
you.
Texas,
You know what I
that's a
mean?
decision that will be made
Don't
by
do
the
it on your
state
worst
legislature.
issue.
You know, Congressman Allred is running all sorts
I'm
of
not
ads
going to your fucking
point.
website,
saying that I made this
Yeah.
decision. I don't serve in the state legislature. I'm
That's a
not the
good
governor. The
point.
folks
You
that
shouldn't
make the
waste it
laws
on
here are the
this.
state legislature and the governor. He knows that. But he's trying to deceive the voters
I want
of
to jump
Texas.
in here because I think it's too important.
We'll give you 60 seconds.
I want to be very clear to the people of Texas. I support the protections and the restrictions under Roe. But Senator Cruz just called himself pro-life. You're not. You're not pro-life. It's not pro-life to deny women care so long that they can't have children anymore. It's not pro-life to force a victim of rape to carry their rapist's baby. It's not pro-life that our maternal mortality rate has skyrocketed up by 56%. That's not pro-life, Senator. So to every Texas woman at home and every Texas family watching this, understand that when Ted Cruz says he's pro-life, he doesn't mean yours.
Senator, I want to give you
I
60
literally-
seconds too. I want to ask
I talked
you,
to a
why is this an
Republican
issue you want
woman.
to address about
You know, it's
saying whether you
anecdotal,
support or
just the other day.
oppose
She said, I'm
exceptions
Republican.
like rape
Jason,
or
I'm
I'm voting
curious.
against
Why
Ted
do you
Cruz
keep
because
asking me that?
this is a
But
real
yet,
winner.
hold on a second. I've
Oh,
asked
wow.
Congressman Allred twice about his voting record and the fact that he voted to strike down Texas's parental notification law and parental consent law. You haven't asked him about that. That is his record. He doesn't
That
deny it.
consent
He gives
is just more
language
bureaucratic hurdles.
that is
Ted. No one cares,
disconnected from
man.
the actual voting
The
record he
craziest
has.
man
And listen,
in
my view, I
Texas.
believe in
You've
democracy.
convinced Ted
If
Cruz.
Congressman Allred does not like the decisions that
Right.
the state legislature has made, if he doesn't like the decisions the governor has made, then he is welcome to run for state legislature or run for governor.
He
But in
won't say if
Congress,
he
neither
thinks
one of
abortion
us
clinics
have a
should
vote.
have
I have not
12-foot wide hallways
voted
for
to strike
safety.
down
this is
Texas
such a
law.
bad argument for Ted
Congressman
Cruz. Do you
Allred
get what
has
he's saying,
Congressman
Matt?
Allred has voted to
He's
tell
doing a
you, a mother
separation
at
of
home,
power.
you have
He's
no
saying
right to know if your
Senate
daughter's getting an
cannot
abortion.
decide
That's an extreme
abortion.
position.
The
And I can
legislature
tell you,
should.
the overwhelming majority of Texans do not
All right.
agree with
Stick with that
Congressman
one, man.
Allred's extreme position against parental rights, against the rights of a mom and dad to be with their daughter in a horrific and challenging time.
Senator, let's move on to another topic.
Let's turn to border security. Congressman, this next question is for you. In
It's gonna get real
2018,
nuts.
you called Trump's proposal to expand the border wall racist. You said, my generation will be the one that tears it down. But last
Good
year,
line.
you said you supported President
Should
Biden's
stick with
plan
it.
to expand the border wall.
I miss that
Congressman,
guy.
Why the change in position?
Listen, thank you for the question. This is personal for me. My family's from Brownsville.
I'm a
My
big
grandfather
pussy.
was a customs officer there. He joined the Customs Department in 1939. That's where my mom and my aunt were born and raised and where I spent a lot of my childhood. And I know that our border communities are real places where folks are trying to raise their families and get ahead. But time and again, Senator Cruz treats our border communities like he's going on some kind of a safari. He comes down, he puts on his outdoor clothes, he tries to look tough, and he goes back to Washington and does nothing to help. In fact, he does worse than nothing. When the toughest border security bill in a generation came up in the United States Senate, $20 billion for border security,
Democrats
he said,
love this.
we don't need a border bill.
Yeah.
That's what he
You
said.
know that's where he's going.
And listen, this is a pattern for him.
You're the
He's never
Western
there for
music.
us when we need him.
Just
When the
talk about
lights
the
went out
outside
in the energy
clothes.
capital of
That's
the
a good
world,
line.
he went to Cancun. On January 6th, when a mob was storming the Capitol,
These-
he was
Matt, these
hiding
are
in a
literally
supply
commercials.
closet.
I'm not
And
kidding.
when the
Like,
toughest
this
border
is-
security bill in a generation came up in the United States Senate, he took it down. We don't have
Cancun
to have a
thing was
senator
just
like this.
like a
Let
month
me
or
be
so
very
after
clear.
Jan
I
6th.
believe in physical barriers as part of a comprehensive strategy to secure the border. We had a bill for $20 billion for 1,000 new Border Patrol agents, for more immigration judges, more asylum officers to help us deal with the backlog. I wanted to make sure we passed that. When I'm in the Senate, we will. And we'll also fix our broken legal immigration system. Senator Cruz has had forever, and he's done nothing to solve this problem. Why would we believe that he will with 6 more years?
Senator, you have 90 seconds for a response.
Well, I want to note once again in his entire answer, Congressman Allred made zero reference to anything he's actually done in office. As Gromer Jeffers rightly noted in his question, Congressman Allred has said publicly, if you believe border security matters, he thinks you're a racist. He calls the border wall, quote, that racist border wall, and he has pledged to tear down that
he left his
racist border
dog
wall
when he
personally.
went to Cancun.
And he said, quote,
This was
we
his dog
will
when he was
not
at
have that
Cancun.
wall in this country. And by the way, that's been his consistent voting record. He's voted against the border wall not once, not twice, but 3 times. Every single time there's a serious measure in the House to secure the border, Colin Allred votes no. Look, it's a pattern
why did
we've
you vote
seen
against
actually at the
the border
presidential
bill?
level.
Except that
because
one
it's what
time
Kamala
that you
Harris does
mentioned
as
where
well.
I voted no.
And understand at home, Colin Allred is Kamala Harris. Their records are the same. I've served with both of them. They voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again, and now they are desperately
open
trying to
borders
hide
bill.
that from the voters. Now, at the end, Congressman Allred said, well, gosh, Cruz hasn't done anything on that. Well, let's talk about my record. When Donald Trump was president, I worked hand in hand
about
with
that vote.
President Trump to secure the border, and we achieved incredible success. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. That's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris inherited. It's what Colin Allred inherited, and they deliberately broke it and opened the border, and Texas is paying the price.
Senator, that's your time. Congressman Allred, in your 60-second response, can you address the original question?
Yeah.
Why was Trump's border wall bad?
Listen,
Why is Biden
what I've
acceptable?
always said is that we have to make sure that as we're talking about border security, that we don't fall into demonizing. And you can take something out of context from 7 years ago, which is what he's trying to do. But he doesn't want to talk about what he said this year, which is that we don't need a border bill. So I have a simple question for you.
Sure.
The $20 billion for 1,000 new Border Patrol agents, for 100 new immigration judges, for 4,000 asylum personnel, to help us have technology to catch fentanyl coming across the border. Why did you not support that, Senator?
It's a great question. Can I take his time and
No,
answer?
no, you
Go
can't have
far
my
enough.
time.
But
he asked me a question, you don't want me to answer.
you can jump in
Senator.
after me.
That was a
Yeah.
fun
Let him finish his
More than
time.
This
happy
is,
to answer
this is not the United States, so I'm
Gentlemen.
not yielding my time. It's
Gentlemen,
fine. It's fine.
Don't ask
don't
me
engage
questions.
each other.
No, I'm
like-
going to ask you a question. You can answer when you have time.
Gentlemen,
but
we
the point
all-
is that
Go
we
ahead.
had a bill. This is a pattern. He talks tough, but he never shows up. We have a phrase for this in Texas, all hat and no cattle. That's what Senator Cruz is. 6 more years of this? Come on. He's had 12 years to do it already. Give someone who actually will.
We should keep a tally.
Thanks, Congressman. Senator,
put a
now you
TV
take
out
60
with
seconds to respond.
Well, Congressman Allred has
ads.
memorized his lines well. I will say this, though. He asked, what have you done? We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years, working hand in hand with President Trump. He didn't address that. He also didn't address the fact that it didn't take a bill for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Colin Allred to break the border. It took a president refusing to enforce the law. You know, you can watch and listen to Congressman Allred talk about the border on allredfacts.com. But I can tell you what he also said just a couple of years ago. He said, I don't hear much about the border here in Dallas. It's not a top-of-mind issue. And I got to say, I've represented Dallas and the whole state for 12 years. I hear about it everywhere I go. I hear about it in Dallas, the folks concerned about the Dallas woman who Venezuelan...
Just a reminder. Oh, shit. I'm so sorry, Matt. I didn't realize that would get rid of it. I pulled your thing by accident. But we got it. We got it.
From the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, the 12-year-old girl who was raped and murdered by Venezuelan illegal immigrants that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris released. And when you say you don't hear about it, you're not listening to Texans.
That's your time, Senator.
Gentlemen, let's move on to a different topic here. Let's turn to the economy. One of the big pain points for Texans, as you likely know, Senator, is the high cost of insurance. In the last 5 years, premiums for home and auto insurance in Texas have risen faster here in Texas than anywhere else in the country. Some insurers have stopped writing new policies or they limit the coverage that they offer Texans. This has happened in other places like Florida, like California, where climate change is causing extreme weather events. The question, Senator, does insurance need a federal solution?
Well, no, it doesn't. Insurance is much better handled at the state level. And I'll tell you, when it comes to inflation, inflation is caused by the policies of Kamala Harris and Congressman Allred. Kamala Harris and Congressman Allred, they came in and they went on a spending binge. They spent trillions of dollars we didn't have. They borrowed trillions of dollars from China that we didn't have, and they ran the printing presses. And I and many others said, if you do this, you're going to drive up inflation. And they didn't care. And I'll tell you, Texans at home are experiencing it. If you're a senior on fixed income, you're finding it harder and harder to pay your bills. If you're a working couple, just buying your first home, you're discovering a 7% mortgage is very different than a 2.5%. If you're trying to fill your tank with gas, or you're a single mom worried about getting braces for your daughter, the inflation caused by Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's spending binge is hurting Texans across the board. And I got to tell you, inflation has in particular been exacerbated by Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's war on energy and oil and gas in Texas. Understand, over and over again, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris put executive orders in place to hurt energy, and Colin Allred has voted against Texas oil and gas and energy over and over again. He voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new permits to export liquid natural gas, and he voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new gasoline-powered engines. Starting in 8 years, 2/3 of all new cars have to be electric, and Colin Allred voted in favor. That drives inflation at home.
Senator, that's your time. A lot to respond to there, Congressman.
Sure. Well, listen, I agree that that insurance is better handled at the local level and the state level. But let's talk about inflation, because I was raised by a single mom who's a public school teacher in a state where we don't pay our teachers enough. And so I know what it's like to go through the grocery store line and swipe your debit card and just say a little prayer and hope that this week
is another
you can
commercial.
That's why I've been so laser focused on lowering folks' costs, on lowering the cost of prescription drugs, on your health care, on your child care, on your housing. We thought it was a good idea to cap the cost of insulin for folks on Medicare,
like we haven't been
$35
seeing
a
them
month.
nonstop.
I voted for it.
Right?
Senator
This is
Cruz
on television. We've been watching
We tried to cap it for everyone because 1 in 4 Americans are rationing their insulin. You know what rationing your insulin means? It means you're not taking the medication you need to survive. And so we said, let's make sure that this is affordable. I was willing to do it and voted for it. Senator Cruz voted against it. And it's not surprising. He's also one of the biggest recipients of campaign donations from big pharma lobbyists in the entire United States Senate. It's true. But this is a pattern. This is somebody who goes to the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun. Do you really think he cares about inflation and about working families? When his entire career, he spent his time trying to cut taxes for the rich and not looking out for working folks. When I'm in the Senate, we'll have somebody who will try to represent all 30 million of us and make sure we keep a focus on lowering your costs everywhere we can.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, you have 60 seconds.
The
Well, you
Democrats should
notice
be.
once again, Congressman Allred
It's
takes
easy
no
mode to have their
responsibility for his own
policy set.
voting record, takes no responsibility for the trillions in spending that have driven inflation, takes no responsibility for the war on Texas energy and LNG and oil and gas. Instead, what he says is, well, gosh, he's voted to lower the price of insulin. Well, so did I. I voted on the Senate floor to lower the price of insulin to $1 a vial. And you know what? The Democrats blocked that. I'll tell you, President Trump put in a program to put in place affordable insulin. As soon as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came into office, they pulled that out. You know what Congressman Allred also voted in favor of? He voted in favor of taking $300 billion from Medicare and using it to pay for Kamala Harris's pet project, using it to pay for health insurance for illegal aliens. That is driving up the cost. Just Medicare premiums under Congressman Allred have gone up 20%, and they are projected to triple. I will fight to lower premiums and make health care more affordable and give you, the consumer, greater choice.
Of course not.
All right, let's turn to a topic that's been a hot button issue in your Senate campaign. Congressman, your opponent is saying in political ads that you refuse to protect the integrity of women and girls sports. The most recent ad actually came out
I'll be
today.
right back.
Congressman, where do you stand on transgender athletes in women's sports?
Well, let's be
You have
very
90
clear.
seconds.
Let's be very clear about what's happening in this campaign. This is, you don't have to be a former NFL linebacker to recognize a Hail Mary when you see one. This is a desperate, last-second attempt by Senator Cruz to distract you because he can't defend his own record. Listen, I'm a dad, I'm a Christian. Of course I don't support these ridiculous things that he's talking about. But what he wants you thinking about is kids in bathrooms, so you're not thinking about women in hospitals. Because it's indefensible. It's indefensible that we have Texas women being turned away from hospitals, bleeding out in their cars, in waiting rooms, being found by their husbands. So all of a sudden, and this is a good one, all of a sudden, the protector of women and girls is going to be Senator Cruz, who thinks it's perfectly reasonable that if a girl is raped by a relative of hers, a victim of incest, that she should be forced to carry that child to term and give birth to it. You think that's perfectly reasonable, but now you're going to set yourself up as a protector of women and girls? It's laughable. And listen, he's trying to distract you because what can he run on? I've never seen somebody who runs for office on what he hasn't done. He's been one of the least productive senators in the entire country. You know that. I talk to Texans all the time who say, I can't think of anything Ted Cruz has done to help me in my life. When I'm your senator, I'll keep focused on the issues that matter to you, on lowering your costs, on securing the border, on restoring a woman's right to choose. That's what I'll be focused on.
Senator Cruz, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Well, it was striking once again in that answer. He said not a word about his own record. I have to admit, the beginning of it, it reminded me of Kamala Harris in her debates, answering everything. Look, I was born in the middle class. It's some lines that sound nice that ignore his record. Let's just talk about his voting record. Again, you can go to allredfacts.com. You can see the actual votes. 4 times.
Check out my
he has
website.
come out for men playing in women's sports, for boys playing in girls' sports. He is a co-sponsor, and he voted for a law called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that boys be able to go in girls' bathrooms, in their locker rooms, and their changing rooms. He voted for it. That is his record. Number 2, there was a bill. It was a very simple bill. It was narrowly defined. It was protecting women and girls' sports. He voted no. The only issue on that bill was whether biological boys should compete against our daughters. That's not fair. Congressman Allred was an NFL linebacker. It is not fair for a man to compete against women.
It should be
the
easy
third
to say
time he
they're
signed
talking
on
about
to
trans
something
people
called
because
the
they're attacking women's
Transgender
rights.
Bill of
That's why
Rights.
they're talking about defending
Transgender
women,
Bill of
because they're
Rights.
attacking their rights.
Explicitly, and he co-sponsored it, mandated that boys compete
I
against
think
girls'
Allred's-
sports. And
Allred's
just 2
pivot
weeks
is
ago,
pretty
Congressman
gross, but I think
Allred joined
it's
100
strong to
radical
say
Democrats in demanding that our
this is a
military
non-issue
allow
that Ted Cruz
drag
is trying to
shows
bring
on
up
military
so that
bases,
he can attack women.
pay for soldiers to have sex
disagree with the
changes
pivot very
using taxpayer
much,
money,
but,
and pay
like,
for
that's at least
children
responsible.
to be
But we'll see how
sterilized
he
and have
responds
sex
to this
changes
here,
on
because I think
military
this
bases.
is
Again, that's
moment.
extreme. That's not Texas,
Senator-
but that is
But it's
his voting
weird.
Senator,
record.
that's
Just
your
say you're
time.
weird. Nobody knows
Congressman,
what
Thank you.
there's a lot to respond to there. You have 60 seconds.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a lot. And I stand here as a proxy for millions of Texans who are sick and tired of this act. You know, when Ted Cruz starts talking about team sports, you got to watch out because the only position he ever played was left out. And I'm not trying to be mean, Senator, but
Is that a commercial? 'Cause
sit
I
this
like
one out,
that.
please.
That's
Listen,
good.
I don't support boys playing girls' sports. I don't.
Why'd you vote
No,
for it?
stop.
Why did you vote
Let me
for it?
speak. Let me speak. What I think is that folks should not be discriminated against. And what Senator Cruz should try to explain to you is why he thinks they should. But ultimately, what he's trying to do is a little game called distraction, to distract you from his record of doing horrific things to folks in this state, of abandoning us when we need him most, of not being there when we need him. That's what he's trying to do, and that's why he's spending so much time on this.
All right, Senator.
Gromer, I'd like
That was a
60
good
seconds on
response.
that.
Well, I have a question.
I'd like to
for
spend
you
more
in those
time on it,
60
actually.
seconds. Parents of transgender youth are worried about the safety and well-being of their kids.
Thank you for asking
And say
that.
ads like these, like the ones that you are running, are dangerous. What do you say to those parents?
Look, we should protect every child. We should protect every
Except
person.
if I want to use
have
them as targets of
advocated
my political
protecting the
project.
safety of every
Yeah,
child and
if
every
you have to
person,
say
Except
that.
if they're a
regardless of
migrant
race, gender,
or a trans
sexual
kid.
orientation, sexual identity. Everyone deserves to be protected against violent crime, against discrimination. But Congressman Allred hasn't said
Against
that. He
teachers
hasn't
doing a
voted for
trans
that.
law.
He's voted repeatedly. Look, I know a lot of y'all at home, for example, saw two biological men competing in women's boxing at
Ted,
the
what do
Olympics.
you think is
That
happening
was wildly
in high
unfair.
schools in
You know,
Pflugerville,
my
Texas?
youngest
when you
daughter
push
plays
this kind of
volleyball.
shit?
It's not fair
You
for
know
a
what I mean?
biological boy or man, a teenage boy, to spike the volleyball ladder, and he has voted repeatedly in favor of that. If you want to see extreme, I encourage you to read the letter Congressman Allred signed. It is on allredfacts.com. You can read it. Don't trust my description of it. Read the words yourselves. You know what he argued for? Military bases should have drag shows and should be able to fly a transgender flag above it. Look, call me old-fashioned. I think the only flag that should fly above our military
Senator,
base should be the American flag.
That's your time, Senator. Congressman, 60 seconds to respond. And if you can, clearly outline where you stand on transgender in women's sports.
Well, listen, as I said, I don't support boys playing
we start a
girls' sports, but
stopwatch
let's be clear
on how much
about the
fucking
Equality
time?
Act, which was a bipartisan vote in the Congress. It was endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. For folks at home who don't know what
Biggest
that
issues.
is, that's basically the biggest
The
speaking
border.
organ for the business community. By the National Association
Trans
of
rights.
Manufacturers. This is not
And
a
healthcare.
radical bill. What it's
I mean, it's
saying
insane
is
that
that folks
this
shouldn't be
is
discriminated
yeah.
against. But what Ted Cruz wants to do apparently is. But he also, again, just wants to distract you. That's what he's going to do. He's been doing it for 12 years. Folks are sick of it. I hear from you all the time about it. Let's turn the page and let's elect someone else.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator, let's move on to January 6th. And question for you.
Okay.
Your own words and statements have changed since January
much
6,
y'all wanna bet that
2021.
Colin
At
goes
one
to
point, you
church?
called the insurrection a violent terrorist
what?
act, saying
How much wanna
anyone
bet
who
Colin Allred
commits an
books his
actual act
commercial
of violence should be
About
prosecuted.
January 6th.
President Trump has said he would consider pardoning the rioters. Would you support that? You have 90 seconds.
So, Gromer, thank you for that question. Listen, my view is clear. I think anyone who commits an act of violence should be prosecuted and should go to jail. If you assault a police officer, you should go to jail for a very long time. And by the way, that's true whether I happen to agree with your politics or disagree with your politics. I've spent 12 years fighting to defend the men and women of law enforcement. That's why I've been endorsed by the leaders of organizations, over 44,000 law enforcement officers. That's why I've been endorsed by Kim Ogg, the Democrat district attorney in Harris County. She is the twice elected Democrat, the chief law enforcement officer in Houston. She's endorsed me
for Cruz.
in this race. Why? Because she wants a senator who will stand with law enforcement, who will lock up criminals and fight to secure the border. And unfortunately,
pro-cop
Congressman
Democrat.
Allred's record on crime has been terrible. Congressman Allred has voted not once but twice in favor of defunding the
we're not
police.
talking about-
Let me tell you what a disaster defunding the police had been. The defund the police movement started in 2019. From 2019 to 2023, let me tell you what happened to the murder rate. In Houston, it went up 29%.
that's
right here in
insane.
Dallas, it went up 17%.
Houston?
In San Antonio, it went up 57%.
So by the way, for people who didn't
and
watch
my
the same
view,
show,
you know, Congressman
Texas
Allred is happy to
made it
talk about
illegal
those who committed acts of
to
violence on
cut
January
police
6th.
funding.
But you don't hear him talking about the
Unbelievable to
Antifa and
push
Black
this
Lives
guy.
Matter riots that burned cities across this
Yeah,
country.
this is all
If you
COVID.
commit an act
We
of
live in
violence,
Texas,
you
Ted.
should go to
Are we
jail.
seriously
And
sitting
there
here
should be no
talking
political
about
favoritism
fucking
in that
Antifa
regard.
and Black Lives Matter
Congressman,
running
you
our
have 90
major
seconds
cities?
to respond.
If that is the case,
that
you
was
have
really
failed.
something. I have to say, you can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. You can't. And it's not funny. Because you're a threat to
Ooh,
democracy.
I like that. Not funny.
I was on the Senate. I was on the House floor when we went through the votes. I remember when you objected to the results in Arizona. Y'all at home might remember where you were on January 6th, what you were doing.
That shit eating
I know
grin
where
on
I
my
was, and I know where he was. I remember when they told us to reach under our seats for these gas masks. I didn't know we had, because they had deployed tear gas in the rotunda. The officers locked all the doors. We barred the doors the president walks through to deliver the State of the Union with furniture that we usually use to hold paper. And I texted my wife, Allie, who was 7 months pregnant with our son, Cameron, and at home with our son, Jordan, who wasn't yet 2. Whatever happens, I love you. And I took off my suit jacket, and I was prepared to defend the House floor from the mob. At the same time, after he'd gone around the country lying about the election, after he'd been the architect of the attempt to overthrow that election, when that mob came, Senator Cruz was hiding in a supply closet. And that's okay. I don't want him to get hurt by the mob. I really don't. This election is his accountability.
But this
you cannot just be patriotic when your side wins. If for the first time in 250 years, this project of ours, this shared American project, that we did not have a peaceful transfer of power, the folks responsible have to be held accountable. That's why Liz Cheney has endorsed me, has got involved in this campaign, and is saying to Texans everywhere, do not put Ted Cruz back in a position of authority, because he's done it once, he'll do it again.
Senator, you have 60 seconds for a rebuttal, but answer the question, would you support pardoning those convicted in the Capitol riot?
So look, I think the Biden-Harris administration has persecuted some engaged in peaceful speech, and if you are being persecuted for peaceful speech, absolutely you should be pardoned. If you engaged in violence, absolutely not, you should not be pardoned. But let me say something interesting. You know, the far left
Donald
is
Trump
so
win the
angry
2020
right now.
election,
There's so much
Ted?
hatred.
That's like the real.
You know, Congressman Allred just
better get
snarled
that,
at me,
right?
you're a threat to democracy.
They're getting
Now, let me be
steamrolled
clear.
by
I don't
both
know
Colin,
Congressman
Allred,
Allred.
and
I
Ted
have no
Cruz,
animus
which
for
is
him
kind of.
personally. But I do know his voting record. His voting record is radical and extreme. And you want to talk about threats to democracy? Let's take a vote that just happened a few weeks ago on the floor of the House, the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act provided that in order to register to vote, you got to prove you're an American citizen. Congressman Allred
So this,
voted
by the way,
no.
for people who don't know
11.5 million illegal immigrants have come into this country under Kamala Harris and Colin Allred's open border policies, and Congressman Allred votes no to protecting our elections and ensuring that people don't vote illegally. That
the state of
is a threat
Texas
to
just
democracy.
got found.
Senator,
with their
thank you.
pants
Let's
down,
move on to
taking
another
off
topic,
legal
gentlemen. Let's shift to
voters,
foreign
American
policy here.
citizens off
Congressman,
of the
you
voter
said
roll
you think there is no more practical
in
military
this
goal for
crackdown
Israel
on
and that it can
illegal
achieve
voters.
in Gaza.
And guess how many
As a
illegal
US
voters
senator,
they
though, how
found?
would you hold Hamas accountable for the worst
Which they never
terrorist
find.
attack
There's
in
no
Israeli
evidence
history
it ever
back on
happens.
October 7th of 2023? And what military approach would you like to see Israel take at this
They're
point?
about to
in
say,
its war?
Yeah.
I really disagree with you on
begin at
most
the
things,
beginning.
but on
October
this,
7th was a horrific
I really,
terrorist
really
attack
like what you got to
by a
say.
terrorist organization in Hamas. The
Nasty,
worst attack on
fuck
the Jewish
you,
people
shut the fuck
since
up.
the Holocaust. They bear the responsibility
Shut
for this
the
war. This is a
fuck up.
war of
They
choice
just
by them. And
burned
Israel has a right to
people
defend
in a
itself, and I
hospital.
have always stood up for their right to defend themselves. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've been on it for the last 6 years, and I was in Israel not long before the attack happened. I visited a kibbutz along the Gaza border called Kfar Asa. While I was there, we shared a meal, and we were also FaceTiming with a Palestinian man in Gaza City who was a father of 4, talking about strengthening ties between Palestinians and Israelis. Kfar Asa on October 7th was the site of what an Israeli general called a massacre. And I don't know what's happened to that father of 4. But I can tell you this, folks on both sides of that fence deserve to have a future, one that's free of this cycle of violence. It's time for us to reach a negotiated settlement to bring the hostages home, to also bring the remains, unfortunately, of the ones who have died in captivity. Hamas must be held accountable, and they will.
Ted is going to flank him to
According
the
to the
right.
Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, they are no longer in a position
Fuck the
to be able
hostages.
to pursue an
Bomb.
October
Bomb
7th style
Iran.
attack. But let's also be very clear. There was a vote in the United States Congress to provide aid to Israel, to provide aid to Ukraine, to Taiwan, to help with the humanitarian situation in Gaza. I voted for it. Senator Cornyn voted for it. Ted Cruz voted against it. You can't say that you are for supporting Israel and their right to defend themselves when you vote against that critical funding.
Congressman, thank you.
I think
Senator,
Israel knows that
same
Ted
question
Cruz
for you.
got it.
What military approach would you like to see Israel take at this point? Multiple fronts are opened up right now.
Well, thank you, Jason. I will say this issue is one of the clearest differences between Congressman Allred's record and my record. When I was elected 12 years ago, I resolved then to be the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate, and I've worked every
Make
day
it
Weird.
easy
Why
for me to
can't-
have someone to vote
stand up
for.
and fight to support
Why
Israel.
can't people say that's
I am
weird?
proud to stand with Israel. Our
I wanna be
position
the
should be
leading-
that America
like, okay, that's
stands
fucking weird.
unshakably with Israel. When President Trump was president, I urged him to move our embassy to Jerusalem. He did, and I was there the
I
day we
said
opened the
to
embassy in
Donald
Jerusalem.
Trump,
And I've never seen such
I want
celebration.
us to show more
when President
loyalty
Trump
to
was
a
president,
foreign
I urged
government
him to
than
pull
we
out of
do
the
to the
disastrous
American
Iran
people.
nuclear deal. He did, and it was the single most important national security decision of his entire presidency. Congressman Allred has consistently lined up against Israel. At the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, he urged them to send money to Gaza, even though it would go to Hamas.
I told Donald Trump I want to burn up the American Constitution and I want to give the ashes to
$100 billion
Netanyahu.
to Iran. 90% of the funding for Hamas and Hezbollah comes from Iran. I'll tell you, Congressman Allred invited a radical imam here in Dallas who calls Zionists monsters and has compared them to Nazis. Congressman Allred calls them the very best of North Texas. I don't support those who engage in anti-Semitic actions, and I will tell you the funders of the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses are among Congressman Allred's biggest supporters. We need clarity. We need to draw a line, and as for me and my home, we will stand with Israel.
Senator, thank you for that. Congressman, you have 60 seconds.
We have to talk about this because there was a
People
vote.
at UT.
It's not about talking. It's about action.
Maybe a bailer.
We had a vote in the United States Congress to provide military funding and aid to Israel, to Ukraine, to Taiwan, to address the humanitarian issues in Gaza and around the world. Part of that aid package was $5 billion in the interceptors that were used in the Iron Dome to prevent the Iranian rockets that just rained down on Israel a couple of weeks ago. That happened in spite of Senator Cruz. It was a very illuminating vote because the extremists were the ones who voted against it. The far left voted against it. The far right voted against it. I think there was only 18 senators who voted against it. And Ted Cruz was one of them. So you can't tell me that you support Israel when the rubber meets the road and you're not there. Let's also be very clear. We have to find a negotiated diplomatic settlement to many of these issues. And that is what I'm going to try and contribute to when I'm in the United States
Israel
Senate.
Ted Cruz.
So I need 60 seconds to respond to that charge there. Now,
Did you vote for it?
Well, let's actually get into it.
You voted against it.
So Congressman Allred is right that there was a bill that was on the floor of the Senate, and I opposed that bill. Why? Because I said at the time that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to flow money to Gaza and give it to Hamas, but they're going to freeze weapons to Israel. Insane. That's exactly what they did. And after that, the House of Representatives took up a bill to provide emergency weapons to Israel, and Congressman Allred voted no. Understand, every single time Congressman Allred, right now in this debate, he is echoing the calls of the enemies of Israel saying, ceasefire now. He claims there is nothing else to be done militarily. I'll tell you, when Israel detonated the pagers against Hezbollah, it was one of the most targeted and effective military actions we have ever seen. Congressman Allred is proud to be supported by J Street, the radical left organization that undermines Israel at every level. And I got to say, listen, that's dangerous.
For
right
people who don't
now,
know,
Kamala
J Street
Harris
is like
and Colin
progressive
Allred
AIPAC.
both want the votes of the anti-Semites on college campuses. I don't want their vote. And
Very
if they threaten Jewish students, they should be arrested. They should be prosecuted. They should be expelled.
Senator,
and if they're from another country, they should be deported.
Senator, that's your time, but let's stay right here. As you mentioned, you have been a strong advocate of Israel's right to defend itself, but the World Court has found it plausible that Israel has committed acts that violate the Genocide Convention. Do you think Israel bears any responsibility for the civilian deaths and humanitarian crisis in Gaza? You have 90 seconds.
I think there is no country on earth that fights a more humane, a more targeted, a more just war than the people of Israel. The World Court and the International Court of Justice is filled with anti-Semites. They repeatedly attack Israel over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, I've got real experience there. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, I represented the state of Texas before the U.S. Supreme Court fighting against the World Court, and we won a 6-3 victory because the World Court was trying to attack Texas just like it's trying to attack Israel. Listen, Israel goes in, number one, it deliberately targets military targets.
This is a loyalty pledge state, you know what I mean?
I've never seen a military action that was actually the leadership of Hezbollah who decided who would get these pagers, and you had to be just enough of a psychopathic terrorist that Hezbollah wanted you on that pager. That's who detonated. It was precisely targeted. You know, Israel, when they go in, when they see, for example, military operations in a building, they send text to all the civilians there. They drop leaflets. They drop what's called a knock bomb on the top that just makes a noise to tell civilians clear out. There's no other nation that goes to the steps it does to avoid civilian casualties. You know who's responsible for the civilian deaths?
So fucking
Hamas,
quickly
because
for
they
another
use
country.
human shields.
Like
And let's talk about
Republicans
records.
and Democrats in this fucking
country
country do for
sanction
Israel.
Hamas for using human shields. That legislation passed into law. It is one of the 101 different pieces of legislation I've enacted, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refuse to enforce that law, they will not sanction Hamas, and Congressman Allred will not stand up to them.
That's your time. Congressman, does Israel bear any responsibility for civilian deaths and a humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
Well, listen, I
90
will
seconds.
agree
I'm
with
in
Senator
tough
Cruz
question.
It's about
that
how much I love
Hamas
Israel
is a
with
terrorist
this guy,
organization
so
that hides amongst the civilian populace. This is part of their battle plan. They anticipate and want civilian casualties. They put their tunnels
You
beneath
are
playgrounds,
disgusting.
beneath elementary schools. They do this knowing that they make it more difficult to then target them without it causing
God, I
civilian
can't wait for a
casualties.
crop of
No
politicians
one
that just openly
in
despises
Texas or across
Israel.
the country should shed any tears for Hamas. What we can do at the same time is have within our hearts the
you have 2
capacity to
weeks
say
to pretend
that
to be
we
the
want to
candidate,
prevent
and you have the
unneeded
that's gonna
civilian
lose Ted
suffering.
Cruz. You have the rest
And
of
that
your
is something that
life
I've
to
always
feel pathetic
believed,
for this.
that we can separate. And we've done this our entire history as a country. This is what makes us great. It's what also makes democracies like Israel great, is that we can separate
Oh yeah,
the
democracy. is
terrorist
cool.
leaders of a group from the people who are being
Just like
subjected
Israel
to that.
separates people
And
by
so,
race.
to me, what we
Without
have
who
had to
gets to
keep
be
our
a real
focus on is
citizen and who
trying to
doesn't.
provide as much aid as possible to innocent civilians in Gaza, to make sure that children are not being unnecessarily targeted. This has to be our responsibility. This has to be the Israeli responsibility.
It's funny, like,
And that's
guys
something that I'll
like
work
this-
on, continue to work on in the Senate when I have a chance.
All right, thanks, Congressman.
Do I get 60 seconds?
Yes, that's.
We don't know.
We actually to.
Senator, we have.
Like Brent Carter,
I thought
each
it was
Hitler was.
90, 90,
It's funny, like being a
I
Ted Cruz
apologize. Here we
fan
got
and
off track.
going.
You have 60 seconds to respond, sir.
I don't know. It's just funny to me.
You know, again, Congressman
You're out
Allred
here
did not
online
address
for Ted
his own
Cruz,
record.
bro.
And that's a pattern at every level. You can go to allredfacts.com and you can see his votes. You can see his vote against providing weapons to
All right, well,
Israel.
after this, we might have
you
to
can
go
see
to
the letter
Allred
Congressman
Facts.
Allred signed. He joined with over 100 left-wing Democrats at the beginning of the Biden administration saying, please send money to Gaza, even though it'll go to Hamas and be used for terrorism. And by the way,
This
I
is
led
why you
19
can't be such a
senators
pussy
in
about this
urging the
shit. Because like,
administration
Yeah, I totally
do not
agree.
send money to Gaza because it will be used by
Like,
Hamas
I
for
get some of
terrorism.
the-
We
Good.
now know
I get
how Joe
that
Biden
the
and
Dems
Kamala
are
Harris
gonna be
resolved that. The
kind of apathetic on
administration
things.
concluded it was,
This
quote,
is one that's just like,
highly
there's no
likely
value in it.
that the money would be used by Hamas for terrorism. But you know what they did? They sent it anyway. They waived U.S. anti-terrorism laws. When it comes to records, you know, you didn't hear anything Congress Allred has done. What I have done is, as I said, authored and passed 101 different pieces of legislation, including legislation targeting Hamas. They should be sanctioned, and I stand with Israel that they should destroy Hamas.
Senator, thank you. Sorry about that just a moment ago as well. Let's move on to another issue here. It's a pocketbook question, something you mentioned earlier tonight, Congressman. You said while you were at the grocery store as a child, you'd swipe the debit card and you'd say a little prayer, you and your mom. Since the pandemic, though, food prices have soared 25%, as everyone in the studio knows here tonight. Senator Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats, though, wrote to President Biden to use his executive authority to lower food prices. Since you did not sign that letter, what is your idea to bring down food prices?
Well, listen, as I said, this is personal for me. I know exactly what it's like when the cost of anything goes up. I mean, I know what it's like to be
personal for me. I like to
dead,
use this in my
dead
ad.
broke.
yeah,
and
it's
to
personal
hope
to me.
that
The
something comes
pricing
along
system
so that you can get through that
affects
week.
my life.
And that's
Like,
why
what
I've
the fuck are
been
you
so
talking
laser
about?
focused on controlling Texans' costs and lowering them everywhere I possibly can. One of those is the child tax credit. For 6 months, it was in place, and it helped us lift millions of
Democrat
Texas
talks
kids
about that for once,
out
but even
of,
still, he's like so
food
weak on
insecurity.
this kind of shit.
You know, the North Texas Food
Compare
Bank
him to
told me
Beto. For
that they
people
could
who
track
watch the
when
Beto
the child tax
Cruz
credit hit
debate,
folks' bank
seriously
accounts because
compare
need
the
for
way
their
he's talking
services
about these bread
would
and
go
butter
down.
issues to this.
We wanted to extend that. We thought it was the right
It's
thing to
very
do to lift
nebby. It's
kids
like, oh, you know,
out of food
tax-
insecurity. But Senator Cruz opposed it. When I'm in the Senate, I'll bring back the child tax credit. I'll also make sure that we cut taxes for the middle class. This has been a tough time for the middle class. We have to make sure that we're alleviating their tax burden. And I'm going to invest in a new generation of housing to make sure that as we can increase our housing supply and lower
Middle
the
class
overall
means
cost of
people who
housing.
like
It's something that has to be
have
a
to
national
work but
priority.
have some
And when I'm
passive
in the
income
Senate, it
too.
will.
Congressman, thank you. Senator, how do you lower food prices?
Well, let me briefly address the child tax credit because that was
By
an integral
supporting
part of
Israel.
the 2017 Trump tax cuts that I spent
Yeah, let's give
hundreds
billions
of
of dollars
hours
of
working
bombs to
on, fighting
Israel.
for, and supporting, and that Congressman Allred opposed. The Trump tax cuts worked incredibly well. We saw the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the lowest African-American unemployment ever recorded, the lowest Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. We saw real results. Now, the Democrats this past year, what they wanted to do with the child tax credit is they wanted to relax the work requirement for parents. They wanted parents not to have to go work. That's a mistake. We need parents to
talking
go back
about
to
this.
work. Now,
Keep on talking about
your
this.
question inflation
Keep
and
it
food.
going. Let's go.
Listen, Kamala
We
Harris
need
and
parents
Colin
away
Allred
from
have
their kids
undermined
serving
our farmers
capitalists.
and ranchers every day. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Texas Farm Bureau to fight for the farmers and ranchers in Texas. They put bureaucratic regulations that make it harder and harder for farmers and ranchers to survive. But nothing hurts more than the cost of energy. Listen, whether it is the natural gas that goes into fertilizers that they use to farm crops, or whether it is the diesel in their tractor or the diesel in the trucks bringing food to the stores, the energy skyrocketing prices are the result of Congressman Allred and Kamala Harris's war on Texas oil and gas. Congressman Allred voted for billions of new taxes on natural gas. He also voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on liquid natural gas, new permits, and he's voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new gas engines. Starting in 8 years, two-thirds of all cars have to be electric.
Senator, that is your time. I want to redirect the question, though, to families like yours years ago.
Actually,
how do you
we
lower
got 15
food
minutes
prices
left.
here?
I
Your
wonder
name
if they're
wasn't on
gonna
that
ask
letter
about
for the
climate
president to use
change.
executive authority.
They
How do
might
you do it?
not.
There are some times where there is price
well, he
gouging
kind of put in
going
that
on.
insurance
and we have to
question,
have the
and
agencies
Ted
that are
Cruz just didn't
responsible for
respond
that
to it. But
looking
yeah.
into it.
Then
But it's also
Tyler
true that some of
Allred
these
either.
supply chain issues and consumption issues from the pandemic are still
It's only an
ironing
hour.
themselves out. But let
I
me
think
be
so.
very clear about something. I opposed
could be wrong.
Joe Biden's pause on LNG exports. In fact, you don't have to just believe me. You can go read the op-ed that I wrote in the Houston Chronicle opposing it, saying it was the wrong thing for
Hey,
Texas
Walt.
energy, that it was also wrong for our national
Not doing
security.
that.
Because while we're trying to wean our European allies off Russian gas, you know what was replacing that? Texas LNG. And so I want everyone out there to understand that I will be a defender of the Texas energy economy, that I'll grow it in an all of the above way, and that what Senator Cruz is telling you is simply not true.
Senator, let's move on.
I need 60 seconds
Dems
to
love
that because
saying
he
Allred.
directly responded there.
Dude,
and what he said
Allred
was
needs
false.
to man
Senator,
up
we
a
don't
little
have
bit
time. We
and
want to
take
get a few more
fucking
topics
time
in
for
here in our
himself.
final minutes here, please, sir.
But give me 30 seconds then. Give
No.
me 30 seconds because he illustrated what I said at the
use your
beginning.
time on the next
the
question.
difference
Wait,
between talk and action.
Senator, we need to move on. You can address it in the next question here,
Yeah.
sir.
Let's change topics, Senator. Both of you say you believe in protecting access to fertility
I mean,
treatments,
this is, yeah.
like in vitro fertilization. But the process effectively ended for a while in the state of Alabama after a state Supreme Court decision there. If both Democrats and Republicans agree on protecting IVF, why hasn't it happened?
So it's a great question. It's very important. I'm going to get to it in a second because I do need to respond to what Congressman Allred
Well, you
just
have
said
90
before.
seconds.
Which is, I said at the outset, there's a difference between words and actions. If you noticed on LNG, what Congressman Allred said is, well, I wrote an op-ed about it, and it's true. He does claim he supports LNG. But when it came time to vote, there was a vote in the House of Representatives
Ted, you
to
also
support Joe
voted
Biden's ban
against
on
the
new
border
permits on
shit.
LNG.
No one cares about
And
these games.
Congressman Allred voted with Joe Biden. He voted against Texas jobs. By the way, in South Texas, there's an $18 billion new LNG export terminal struck down by left-wing judges, the kind of judges Congressman Allred supports. That cost
I didn't realize there
6,000
were
high-paying
left-wing judges
jobs
out
in South Texas. This is an agenda where his record, yes, his words sound good, but his voting record, remember his first 4 years in the House, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He didn't deviate on a single vote, which meant he voted against oil and gas and Texas jobs repeatedly. All right, IVF, incredibly important topic. I am the author of legislation that would protect IVF as a matter of federal statutory right. I joined with Alabama Senator Katie Britt to put a clear protection of IVF. I strongly support IVF. You ask why it hasn't passed? Because Democrats, very cynically, they stood up and objected. Why? Because they want to campaign on the issue, and if my legislation had passed, it would be unequivocal in federal law that IVF is protected for every American, and it is Democrats who blocked it.
Senator, that is your time. Congressman, IVF, 90 seconds.
This is an absurd.
If Senator Cruz is telling you something that doesn't match with what you're seeing from others, then it's probably because he's lying. I was named by an outside group the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. This is something I've worked at, not just in an election year, like he's trying to change his image in this election year. I've done it over the course of my 6 years in Congress. Let's talk about IVF. Because IVF didn't need protecting until he got his way of going after it. No
There
one
you
was
go.
thinking that we needed to protect IVF
There you go.
until he was singularly responsible for pursuing, by putting in place judges at the district court level, the circuit court level, and the Supreme Court level, folks who would put at risk this miracle technology. And you know what? It's not just that. When he ran for president in 2016, he supported the personhood amendment. You know what that means? That would make something like IVF illegal. But also ban certain forms of birth control. You did.
Yep.
You did. When you ran for president in
Fundamentally
2016,
false.
you can look it up, folks. You don't have to believe me. Again, you've been seeing him lie to you for 12 years. Let's have a senator who doesn't. And I will always protect IVF, but it was at risk because of him.
Senator, 60 seconds for a rebuttal.
Well, let me say on IVF, you can watch the debate on the Senate floor where I tried to pass strong, clear federal legislation protecting IVF, and the Democrats stood up and objected it cynically. But I got to say, there's something Congressman Allred says that he says all the time. He says this independent group rated him the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation. And I got to say, I found that quite odd, so I went and looked at this group. Because how can someone who votes 100% with Nancy Pelosi, which is what he did his first 4 years, how can he be bipartisan? How can Colin Allred? Colin Allred voted 100% with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris their first 2 years in office. How could he be called the most bipartisan member? And then I discovered this group. Its board consists of a bunch of Democrat donors. They say on their website, we don't look at votes. We don't examine every vote. So he can vote. He votes exactly like Nancy Pelosi. But yet this group gives him camouflage.
Okay, let me
100. True or false? Your first 4 years in the House, you voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. True or false?
Senator, that's your time. Congressman, you can
respond.
I'm an anarchist
you can respond to
who
the next
wants
question here. We're almost out of time. You can
politicians to get
respond to the
involved
next question.
in children's sport.
I want to ask you this question. Kamala Harris,
Okay.
Congressman, she wants to give $25,000 in down payment assistance to people wanting to buy their first homes. She's also proposing a $40 billion innovation fund to build more affordable houses in Texas. The question tonight, do you support those?
Go play with a
Okay, so
fidget
let me
spinner.
just address the bipartisanship thing, because over 70% of the bills that I've co-sponsored over 6 years have been bipartisan. And you know what? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is another group you might have heard of, Senator Cruz. They gave me an award,
so
the Jefferson
bad.
Avenue Award, for my bipartisanship. So that is not in question. What is in question is your recent transition to trying to be someone who wants to actually get things done instead of being a hyper-partisan. Now let me go back to housing here, because to me, the focus has to be on increasing our housing supply. We have to build more housing. We have to build more affordable housing. We have to make sure that it's connected to our communities. This has to be a focus for us and a national priority.
What, like the
I was in the
sewers?
Obama administration at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This has been a need for
Look at
us
my
for a
candidate's
long
dog.
time, but we haven't addressed it fully.
never get
When I'm in the
fucking
Senate, we'll make sure that we move a
universal
bill
healthcare.
to try and build a new generation of affordable housing across Texas and across the country. That will help
the Chamber of
lower
Commerce
costs
is
for folks and
definitely
also
gonna do
increase
this.
the supply. We have to do it. Here in DFW,
Our
we've got 300
partners.
people a day moving here. And you know what? We also have to invest in our infrastructure. And I want to talk really quickly about that, because there's a bill to bring $35 billion to Texas over 5 years, the bipartisan infrastructure law. Mitch McConnell voted for it. I voted for it. Senator Cruz voted against it. When you're growing as fast as we are,
God, it's
you
just
have
this
to have the
every
infrastructure
question.
to keep up with it. But he apparently didn't think that was a good idea.
I mean, Cruz.
Congressman, thank you.
sucks,
Senator, you have 90 seconds, sir.
Well, when it comes to
of
housing,
course,
nothing
yeah.
is driving up housing costs as powerfully as the 11.5 million
Illegal
immigrants
immigrants,
that
of
Congressman
course, yeah.
Allred and Kamala
Insane.
Harris
Such a
have let in
fucking
with their
lie.
open borders, and they want to keep letting
Just
in.
give him a paddle that
But
says
let me say,
illegal
when you talk
immigrants
about
and have him
bipartisan
Make his
raise it.
own ass.
record, let's compare our actual records. Congressman Allred mentioned the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has endorsed me in this race
I love
because
to be a
I've been the leading
Democrat and
champion
cite
of
this Chamber
jobs
of Commerce.
here in
But that's like
Texas
such a
for 12
self-owned by
years.
Allred. Why
In
the fuck are you
6
talking
years in the
about the
House,
Chamber of
Congressman
Commerce
Allred has
anyway? They're
authored and
your
passed
enemy.
3 pieces of legislation. 3.
Colin
Set the
Allred.
In my
NRA.
time in the
Colin Allred
Senate, I
should
have authored and passed
Introduce
101
you
different
Donald
pieces of
Trump and your
legislation.
wife as a
2
dog.
different bills to create new interstates. I-14 from West Texas to East Texas,
go.
all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. That was Raphael Warnock and me, a liberal Democrat, Cruz Warnock. We passed it. That's going to produce thousands of new jobs. I-27, a new interstate that's going to run from Laredo through West Texas, through the Panhandle, all the way up to Montana. That was Cruz Lujan. Ben Ray Lujan, a Democrat from New Mexico, that passed. That's going to create thousands of jobs. I authored the legislation to expedite the permitting on 4 brand new bridges in South Texas that is going to create thousands and thousands of jobs for South Texas farmers and ranchers. The Texas Association of Business refers to my legislation expediting those bridges as the single most important legislation for Texas-Mexico trade since the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Congressman Allred has no record to point to.
Senator, thank you. To be clear, Congressman, do you support the initiatives that Kamala Harris is proposing, the $25,000, the $40 billion innovation fund?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I think we have to start with the housing supply before we get into anything else.
And how do you pay for that?
Yeah. Well, listen, this is something that is going to have to be a priority for us because it is an important question. How do you pay for something? Because there are certain investments that bring back more than what you put into it. When you have a housing shortage, you have to build more housing because that's driving up every other cost, and it's really hurting our young people. When you have an investment in infrastructure, like $35 billion that Texas is getting, that's happening because I voted for it in spite of Senator Cruz voting against it, that is something that's a smart investment that's going to help us grow our economy. When it comes to the CHIPS and Science Act, which was a good idea that I was a part of passing in the House, that John Cornyn was helping to pass in the United States Senate to bring back high-tech manufacturing to Texas and America. We were voting for it. Senator Cruz is voting against it. Our economic output has been in spite of him. And when I'm in the Senate, I'll make sure I'm part of these hard work that we have to do to roll up our sleeves and get things done, like addressing housing.
Congressman, thank you. It feels like the time has flown here in the studio tonight. I hope our viewers have gotten something out of this, but it's now time to make your final pitch to voters for your closing statements.
I'm glad we spent
Congressman Allred, you won the
on how
coin
much we
toss
love
tonight.
Israel.
You chose to go first. You get 60 seconds, sir.
And we'll talk about this.
Well, I want to thank you all for moderating. You did an excellent job. I want to thank Senator Cruz for a spirited debate. Listen, we're all Texans. My idol, John Lewis, used to say that we might have come here on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. We're all Americans, and we're all Texans. We need a leader who will bring us together around our shared values.
Even the
Canadians. That's what I've tried to do in my 6 years in Congress. That's the exact opposite of what Senator Cruz has done. Whatever he says tonight, you've seen it for 12 years. He's been one of the most divisive senators in the entire country. If you don't like how things are going in Washington right now, well, you know what? He is singularly responsible for it. He has introduced this new kind of angertainment where you just get people upset and then you podcast about it and you write a book about it and you make some money on
like a Hillary
it.
Clinton
But you're not
invention.
actually there when people need you. Like when the lights went out. When 30 million Texans were relying on a senator to spring into action.
Put up that
he went
photo,
to
Matt,
Cancun.
of the dog.
That's who he is. If you give me the chance to be your United States Senator, I'll never abandon
This is
you.
Ted Cruz
And I'm
leaving
asking
his
for your
dog.
vote and for your support in this election.
Congressman, thank you. Senator Cruz, you get the final word tonight. You have 60 seconds.
The stakes in this election are the highest of my lifetime.
Yeah.
Congressman Allred and Kamala Harris are both running on the same radical agenda. Congressman Allred has pledged to be the 50th vote for Chuck Schumer to end the filibuster, to end the requirement of 60 votes to pass major legislation. That means if Congressman Allred is elected, we will see the Democrats, number one, strike down every voter integrity law in the country. Number two, add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states to give them 4 new Democrat senators. Number three, grant immediate voting rights to every illegal alien in America. That would turn Texas blue, and every
So much of
statewide
fantasy, I
elected
can't
official
even
in
take it
Texas
seriously.
would be defeated in the next election. And number four, pack the U.S. Supreme Court. That would jeopardize our fundamental rights. I've spent 12 years fighting every single day to defend jobs and freedom and security. Congressman Allred wants to destroy what we've got in Texas because he shares Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris's value.
Senator-
I will fight to keep Texas, Texas.
Senator, that is your time tonight. Gentlemen, we do want to thank you for a spirited and animated but respectful debate tonight. We appreciate that here. But before we go, we do want to remind our viewers, it's hard to believe here too, but Election Day is
if
coming
y'all
up
wanna
here
see it,
shortly.
that's
Early
fine.
voting.
Whoa. So that's the debate there. We're going to hang out, take some questions from the audience and chat a little bit. Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just have to ask, you're less familiar with these candidates than I am here in Texas. I'm curious, your initial thoughts.
I mean, generally, it's easy to look good opposite Ted Cruz, and there's a few moments. I like Colin Allred said, "Stop smiling." I think that is
That was
just
a good one.
something future. If Ted Cruz wins this, that's just something because the guy can't take things seriously. I genuinely thought it was a 2-hour debate, given how much time they spent on Israel, and it's just an hour, and
Yeah.
you're gonna, jeez.
No, I think that's very fair. It's insane that there was no real talk about climate change in like the energy capital of the United States of America. They almost were like doing the moderator's job a little bit by like, I mean, I know it was like Ted Cruz trying to like get hits at Allred over LNG, but kind of surprising that come up.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel like maybe the whole that's the thing is like he hit him on going to Cancun. But
Which
then
is a
it's like
good,
also like I support the industry. I'm the friendliest here. It's not like
well,
what are we actually doing?
here's the point, and I'm sorry, and I'm just going to be like, I'm going to do the worst thing ever. I'm sorry, everybody. Rank punditry, you know what I mean? Just like talking balls and strikes. You can make the nastiest anti-planet argument possible about the Biden administration and energy. Joe Biden has opened up more of the Permian Basin to oil and gas exploration than his predecessor, right? And oh man, we're worried about renewables. Well, here's the fact. Texas has expanded fossil fuel industry in the past 4 years and has also expanded its wind and solar, right? So, again, like I'm not even, I'm just like trying to like almost coach Allred on this. Like you can win there. You can say, hey, why are you guys against ingenuity in Texas? I thought you want Texas to be an energy leader. We're leading in wind, we're leading in solar, we're leading in fossil fuels, right? And they don't do that. But that was also because the moderators weren't interested in talking about it. And I think that more than anything, I mean, I have some more points to get to in a second, but more than anything, I think it kind of shows that the way that this campaign has been run, because look, we can hope that the moderator, that the journalists doing this kind of thing, ask certain kind of questions, and fair enough to criticize them over that. But oftentimes that's going to be reflective about what the campaign is. And what the campaign from Colin Allred has been is that Ted Cruz is not strong on the border. I'm not kidding. Like that's literally like one of the main ads that they've been doing, and a bunch of stuff about trans rights, right? And a bit about abortion, where I think Colin Allred really did, sort of slap Cruz around on that. He looked bad. But really striking to me how little Trump was mentioned in this debate, I have to say, by both sides.
And they didn't even do the did he win the election question?
Totally. I thought that was really shocking. And I thought it was shocking that Allred didn't even sort of like dig down on that. You know, I I think more than anything, it's like if you were somebody, like me living in the state of Texas, like you watch this debate, and apart from like the abortion stuff, um, there was a lot of this debate that wasn't really about you. It wasn't really about you. It was about who the Chamber of Commerce likes better and who whatever
Who won the most bipartisan boy award?
you know and I think that's a real failure from Allred, because I was saying to Matt before the debate is that I think that Cruz probably has this election still, but Cruz is probably one of the most beatable Republicans that you could go up against, because he's just fundamentally unlikable politically. He's can be kind of nightmarish, um, and he's very off-putting to a lot of folks, from both like some of the super super far right guys to that kind of more traditional like Texas, Harris County, around Houston, Republican, because Cruz does represent that kind of Tea Party firebrand. That's what his kind of like development has been. I thought one of the weird things towards the end, I'm just looking at my notes. One of the things at the end was that, if Colin Allred really wanted to win this election, he should be speaking about all of the suffering and incongruities that are coming from Republican rule of this state, right? Because we have had Republicans running this state pretty much my entire life, right? I mean, it's been 30 years since a Democrat has won statewide office in the state of Texas. And a lot of the problems in the state are like on them, right? And that's something, if I was a Democrat running in an election against a Republican, The only thing I would point to would be like, hey, you and your party have been running shit here. So you think this is a problem? You think that is a problem? Well, y'all have been the governor. Y'all have been in the ledge. Y'all have been running this kind of thing. There's a lot of responsibility that goes there. They were talking about like, oh, Texas being this new high tech leader. Well, you know what's happening right now is because of these insane social wars. So I thought Allred did okay on the trans stuff. Like it was like nasty, obviously, like the disavowal. But at least at his first couple of attempts to respond to it, he said, "This is far off, from like an actual issue, right?"
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We're even more explicitly saying like, Ted Cruz talking about women is rich when he's, creating so much suffering for women who are pregnant. Again, like disagree very much with his just acceptance of the premise, the anti-trans stuff. But at least like trying to quickly pivot it back to something more reasonable. Another thing that is like kind of associated with that is that when they do this kind of shit that they're doing on the social politics, they're really controlling in your life, controlling your family, all this kind of stuff that Republicans are doing. It hurts Texas as a state competitively, particularly in high tech, high education positions. Right. So, oh, great. It's great. Texas is bringing in all this high tech chip manufacturing and all this kind of stuff that's moving to the state. Right. Well, who's going to take those jobs in those positions? Well, sooner or later, the people who are training those folks, like it's not going to be happening at the university systems in Texas. As both Ted Cruz and Colin Allred were like, hey, I think it's great that the that the regents of the University of Texas system or the regents of the Texas A&M system are beating the shit out of our kids, right? um all this kind of stuff is hurting our ability to attract the best and the brightest in education, because why would you want to come to Texas where your campuses are a war zone and we're having police tear gassing your students?
Yeah, and I said at the moment he did better on the abortion question than I thought Biden did, definitely,
Yeah, no, I think you did.
which was like to mention illegal immigrant who killed somebody, truly bizarre. And I would say even better than Walz in the vice presidential debate. I think Harris was good, was better than, but this was decent. But the problem is like this is like the straightaway that you have to nail because that's your advantage in the race is you're faster and top speed. And like I feel like they both him and Walz and even like Harris to an extent, like they definitely excel at that issue because it is such a strong issue for them. Yeah, abortion. But I just don't think that they're driving it home to the extent that they need to be. And I think like that could be disastrous. I don't know.
I totally agree. And I think that like while he had those good responses to some of the stuff on abortion, on immigration, I mean, I think falls really flat, right? The oh, why didn't you vote for this bill or whatever? I think I think it's wrong for people to say that it doesn't have any value in them pointing that out. I just again doing the sin of rank punditry. But I think it only has so much utility, right? It only works once, right? It's not a play you can call 2, 3, 4 times. And like there's a point to be made eventually about, hey, what are you talking about? Housing costs in the state of Texas are caused by immigrants to the state. That's complete bullshit. In fact, Texas Monthly just came out with a really in-depth study and piece on the like a lot of the forces behind migration in Texas are that big business in Texas loves to exploit migrant labor, right? So instead of like, oh, the Democrats are like doing this or that, why don't we look at some of those companies? Now, Colin Allred's not that kind of candidate, I guess. And I think that that's a real failure here because I think, again, Ted Cruz is very beatable. But if you try to beat Ted Cruz on, I'm going to be tough on the border and I'm going to use, and I'm sorry, I know for new folks, like the all hat, no cattle can sometimes sound like really authentic, but it's like that shit is almost like a cliche at this point. You know what I mean? Um, that like, no one's like, oh, I think that there are too many illegal immigrants in this state, but I really think that Colin Allred's bipartisan approach to it. No, they want fucking gators in the Rio Grande. You know what I mean? Like they want turrets, those guys. And thinking you're going to ever be able to beat them on that kind of thing, I think it's just fundamentally delusional.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing is like with the trans thing, you almost got to put the abortion thing first. Like the trans people are the other du jour that has been selected because of this other attack that they got going on right now. And I mean, yeah,
I can't believe. I mean, I'm sorry. I hate to do this, but like, I can't believe that the moderators let the trans thing be. What probably, if you were to clock, it was 25 minutes of the debate. I mean, really,
right, yeah,
because they did 3 questions on it, and the attempt at climate change was about insurance, which both of them sidestepped immediately. Um, the Gaza stuff, I mean, that's not inspiring at all.
no, horrible. And I mean, the one thing to watch back is when Ted is watching Colin respond, and I don't remember exactly what he says, but something vaguely like aid to Palestinians or whatever. Ted Cruz gets so excited. He's like, "Ah, look, see
Yeah.
what they did." It's like he's counting the APAC money he's gonna get just from that moment. It's
Dude, can we talk about the ad thing though? And tell me, if you think I'm just fixating on this a little bit too much, but I mean, Colin Allred quoted verbatim his TV advertisements, I think probably 7 times. I kept on saying we should keep a tally, but it was definitely over 5.
if Ted's people were smart, they would cut an ad like that
Oh,
and
it's so
show.
good.
Yeah,
And how is Allred being a football player for Baylor and the Titans, like, how does that not come off as cooler?
yeah.
Like,
Then they said
it comes off as so lame, it's terrible.
the only position he played was left out. It was,
That was a good line. Yeah, you're right. I will give him that line. But other than that, like whenever Colin Allred brings up his football career, you for the most part, you're about to snooze. That was the only time he got a
yeah,
little left.
that's the thing is like you okay. You don't carry yourself like I don't know what I would expect. Like I don't know Michael Strahan or something, but very. I would like to see Colin in the locker room, like what his demeanor was like.
So, for folks who haven't been following this race, I mean, there's a couple quick things. Money, there's going to be it's like blowing past every record for the amount of money that has been spent in Texas Senate election, which is crazy thinking about how successful Beto O'Rourke's campaign was. But one thing that's really notable comparing Allred to Beto is that Beto like had these huge, huge, huge rallies across the state of Texas. You know, um, was constantly in the public. Well, Colin Allred has kind of hidden himself. So I was really interested to see this debate just to see how he would sort of present himself to the state. I don't think he was fairly effective as showing himself as a leader on that. And I think one thing that's also extremely notable is that Beto O'Rourke, let's just be clear, is not even like a Bernie Sanders style thing. It's like, it's like a little, but Beto was actually able to speak to some level of like left economic populism, which I think that looking back at that debate now and really thinking about it, I think that was the most glaring weakness of Colin Allred is that he was completely unable to speak to the struggles of working people in this state. And Texas is one of those states that like, we're not like, sorry to draw comparisons, but like we're not a Mississippi, right? But we are a state that has both like one of like the highest growth rates in the country, let alone the world, in terms of our economy and our GDP, and just abject poverty, right? Like there's a lot to be said about that. Particularly, you notice they were both talking about South Texas, where I think that's the real battleground. Ted Cruz certainly couldn't speak to that, and Colin Allred I mean, the closest he was able to do was talking about the CHIPS Act, which is something that you and I have both said that Democrats should like run on and defend. But at a certain point, that's almost like you're talking in the know, right? Do you know what I mean? Like for a normal person, you have to talk like, what does that mean? What is that experience like? And what's crazy about Colin Allred is that he can talk about saying a prayer at the grocery store and hoping the debit card goes through, and is just unable to convey a real economic populism.
Right. He leans heavy so much on it because the actual policy prescription doesn't show that at all.
But even if the policy description did, I actually don't think he could convey that point to people well. Do you get what I mean? Like he's a bad salesman for his politics.
Unless it's a pre sort of digested line from an ad.
I can't believe that I mean, I don't know. People in the in the chat, tell me if you agree with me if those came off as canned as they did to me. But to me, every single time I just heard it as, oh, this is. But I also, like understand one. There's like me as like a guy who covers this shit and follows it really closely. But there's also me as a guy who watches college football and NFL, which is where all of these ads are nonstop. I was watching Texas Oklahoma this week, and there's Colin Allred ad. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think I'm the only person watching this debate who's like, oh, well, I've seen that before.
Right.
But maybe I pay more attention to. Probably most people just look the other way when it's on TV.
Yeah, it works like the like pop music thing where it's like the fifth time you make people hear it, it really slaps.
Let's see. See if there's anything from our Discord before we run. I would just add really quick that there is one thing that's kind of notable too about this Allred thing is that Ted Cruz is like a gettable guy. He's a guy that you should be able to beat. I think Beto sort of showed that as like an opportunity.
Do you think he'll even run if he like Ted might just cash out after next time? I don't know. Ted
Allred or Ted?
Wins. If Ted wins.
Actually, let's talk about this for a second because I mean Ted's got his podcast, which I think like there's been some kind of like, whispering that like maybe Ted is trying to throw this election because he just wants to go full time into media.
He wants to be a YouTuber. That's pretty glamorous, Ted. I mean, I personally would rather be on like the Senate Foreign Relations Committee,
but it's really beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think that for people who don't know, basically Ted Cruz has this podcast, which is like one of the better performing ones. I mean, to be fair, Matt, he's beating us, but there's some really funky things happening with his podcast distributors and his campaign where they seem to be flowing a lot of money. And he's sort of like right on the edge about what is legal and what isn't. But one thing that's really notable about Colin Allred that I think people really in this audience, the left reckoning audience, really should recognize is the fact that they put their thumb on the scale so hard for this dude in the Texas Democratic Senate primary. They put their thumb so hard behind Colin Allred. On this belief that this kind of centrist, bipartisan, sorry to say it, robotic sounding, non-charismatic figure was going to be their guy. Now, what we can't know is if they did that because they were worried about the progressive challenge that they had, or because they thought that Colin Allred was going to do what he did do, what he has done, which is raise a shitload of money for them. And this is money that goes to Democratic Party consultants. It goes to people who write ads for them. It goes to people, all this. And I think one thing that's really important for people to realize is that we might lose the election. We will lose the election. I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm just saying like working people don't have a candidate here, right? But a lot of people are going to be able to buy new property for themselves, a boat, all these kind of things. This is a moneymaker There's money in politics, and money in politics goes beyond just like, oh, politicians doing things because certain industries. Money in politics also means that certain people get to live a kind of lifestyle because all these folks, working people, worried people out there in the state of Texas say, I want Ted Cruz to lose. I'm going to give $50, $100, $200, $500 to the Allred campaign. Well, that money flows to the consultants and all these folks who work on this kind of thing. And Allred, they decided for whatever reason that he was the one, and they put their thumb on the scale for him in a way that I think a lot of people don't realize. That before the primary campaign even really took off, Matt, everyone was like, "Oh, it's Colin Allred," because it had just sort of been established beforehand.
Football player, yeah.
Which would be great, dude. Put Colt McCoy up there. Hell, man, even
Manziel.
No. Well, that's a bad
Okay.
one. Even somebody who I've been critical of. I mean, dude, McConaughey spoke so well. Actually, I'm sorry, Matt. I know we were like sort of wrapping up. It's insane that they didn't talk about. It's absolutely insane that they didn't talk about. It's insane that the moderators didn't ask about this, and that Allred didn't force it into the debate. Was Uvalde.
Oh yeah.
I mean, are you serious? I mean, I'm so sorry to throw the wrench as we were wrapping up, but I can't believe that. That is unbelievable. That a tragedy that is so real and visceral. And those families, by the way, have been so abused by the fucking Texas legislature. They were scheduled to testify at the Texas Ledge. And the goddamn Texas legislature kept on bumping their testimony till 2, 3 in the morning. So people drove up to Austin from Uvalde, which is a couple hours away from here. And they made these parents of children whose bodies and corpses were so destroyed by that violence that they were using their shoes to be able to identify the victims. The fact that they didn't talk about that's a real failure of moderation.
Yeah, nothing remotely gun control.
Crazy. Well, thank you all for hanging out with us before. We appreciate all of y'all so much. For new viewers, this is Left Reckoning. I'm David Griscom. This is Matt Leck. We talk every Tuesday at 6 Central about politics, world affairs, etc., from a left-wing, pro-working class perspective. And we hope that you stick around and join us next week. We have a lot on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like, and follow us, and you can get access to so much more. And keep up with us at patreon.com/leftreckoning. You won't want to miss these bonus episodes. We are really diving deep into a lot of different topics about American left-wing working class history, about little freaks that we like to make fun of. And we hang out, have a good time. And this is a really good community. So patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to all of the bonus content. Appreciate all of you. Thank you, Matt.
Peace.
See y'all soon.